This episode is brought to you by Pine Melon. When you order groceries from Pine Melon, you're getting locally sourced items from right here in Colorado. I just ordered my groceries from Pine Melon for the first time and was able to get super creative with my family's weekly menu. This week, we're having bison burgers with antibiotic-free, hormone-free, grass-fed meat from Great Range Bison, and lettuce wraps featuring Gotham greens and Colorado Sun tofu. And if you order from Pine Melon and use promo code CityCastDenver, you'll get $75 off your first delivery. That's promo code CityCastDenver for $75 off your first order at pinemelon.com.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Today on CityCast Denver, Mayor Mike Johnston has a big new idea. He wants Denver to have more affordable housing, and he wants to pay for it with a new sales tax, 5 cents on every $10 spent. City Council is debating the details this month, and voters will likely have the final say in November. So we brought in an expert who knows this stuff inside and out, former at-large councilwoman Robin Kniech. Today is Monday, August 12th. I'm Bree Davies, and here's what Denver's talking about. Robin Kniech, welcome to CityCast Denver.
It's great to be here.
So the mayor has proposed this new sales tax, 0.5% to fund affordable housing, which I think is a term that is often misunderstood. What do you think the mayor means when he says affordable housing?
We'd all love a little more detail on the goal of where these dollars can really make the biggest difference. Where the conversation's been focused up until now is just what's legally eligible under the proposal. And so he's described, to other outlets like Colorado Public Radio this week, his intention to really use this for the full range of households in our city, from people who need it for rent and people who need it for ownership to be able to buy a new home. That is great in terms of what legally can be done, but I think we don't yet have an answer to the question of where we really want to make the biggest impact. And that's where the discussion really, I hope, goes in the coming weeks.
Well, what you're describing right now is he's saying it could go to all these different things. So like it could be used for voucher programs that people use to access existing affordable housing, or house buying, like first-time homebuyer programs. My assumption was this money is just going straight to land acquisition and construction of affordable housing. Is that a naive assumption?
Well, the law is written right now, the ordinance that's proposed is written to allow 2 different kinds of ways. One is to build housing, just like you described. The other is to give financial assistance to people who are trying to get into that housing. That could be what we call sometimes a voucher or rental assistance. It could be down payment assistance for a homeowner. I think that it also could be services to support those individuals and help prevent displacement, according to the language. It's a really good array of things. They're all the kinds of things we want cities to be doing to help people struggling with housing. Again, the question is just, where's the focus?
That is something that might keep this from voters passing it. I'm just thinking about what all we need to know to sign off and say, yes, I want you to tax us. But I feel like we need to know what's going to happen with that money.
This tax is an incredible opportunity for our city to make an impact in housing. And I think that with a little more work, it should be ready for those voters to be able to do what we do best in Denver, which is be generous and try to make an impact on things where the city has decided to lead, where sometimes other levels of government have left us behind. But I do think that it's pretty unusual to not have more math on the number of homes that could be produced with this fund. That is a very standard process with proposals like this. It's what we've done for the last several big ballot measures and housing funds in Denver. And that math is not done yet. And I think that might be hard for some voters. It should be done, and we don't need to wait until after it passes to do it.
Well, he has said that the tax would raise $100 million a year and build 44,000 units. Is that not enough? I don't know. What do you take from those numbers?
I like to pull back the curtain a little bit in conversations like this with your listeners. The administration's actually walked back a little bit from that figure. They now talk about the number of homes that are needed as 44,000, a good step along the way. They talk about household help as well as building homes. So I don't think that they have stuck with that estimate that that's what they can build. And that's because the math hasn't been done yet. It makes a big difference. I want to just throw out some numbers because those of you who are listening to this, you don't have to get out your whiteboard. No one needs a calculator. But for families earning below $50,000 to $60,000 in our city, 78% of the housing need is for those households. There's a certain price tag to build those. Those are mostly rental homes, apartments. And if we were to spend a majority of the money there, it would cost a certain amount. And then it would cost something different to, for example, help someone buy their first home. That's a one-time cost, and it helps them get into that first home that they've been wanting to do. And then we add that up and we say, okay, this is actually how many homes we can build. What if the mayor wants to do something different with this fund? Right now, it's written to allow the city to subsidize rents between $2,500 and $2,900 a month. That's a luxury rent in Denver. This ordinance is written to allow them to do that. If they do that kind of work with this fund, they're going to build a different number of units. So you really have to know a little more about where we really want to make an impact to be able to say to the voters, here's how many homes we can build. Let's make it just one step more interesting. You all have talked a lot on this podcast about homelessness because that's what Denver's talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I want to help someone who is resolving from those motels that All In Denver has built, I need to have $1 for that building to be built, that home to be built, but I also need $1 for service to keep that person housed, and I need $1 for a rental subsidy. I actually need 3 types of money. So that's different math. And I think that we can actually use these dollars. It's eligible to build housing to get people on that next step. But I really, at this point, am not clear how much focus there is on making that impact because it has not been a part of the discussion.
Well, and you were saying, too, that currently, as it's written, the funds from this could subsidize someone's luxury rent. I could see that as a voter being a concern for me to sign off on this tax. Am I signing off on a tax that is going to help somebody who doesn't necessarily need it? And in reality, that large percentage of folks living under $50,000 or $60,000 a year are the ones that are not going to end up getting that money? I mean, how do we parse that as voters?
This is where the city council is actually doing great work. And, we don't get to see a lot of the city council work. If you, read the news or listen to the podcasts in Denver, they're going to be about the mayor. But your city council right now in Denver is asking a lot of hard questions about this. Some language got added to the ordinance this week that says that the intent is for the fund to be used to meet the demonstrated need in the city. That's good language. It's not airtight. It doesn't prevent these dollars from going for those luxury rents. That ordinance could be written to cap the rental assistance a little bit lower. Right now in Denver, depending which source you look at, an average or a median rent is like $1,800 to $1,900 a month. And so this ordinance could be written to target those who are needing that help the most on the rental side. And it can go to a higher income on ownership because I want to be clear, people earning, let's just say $90,000. That's the level we're talking about. When I talk about those rents, I'm talking about households earning about $90,000. They are struggling with housing in our city. They're struggling to get into homeownership. They are struggling to find a home with enough bedrooms for their kids to be in a stable school and not have to change apartments every year. They'd want to build some wealth. And we can have higher income limits for people who are wanting that next step. And then we can focus our rental money. So those are examples of things the council is discussing. And we're going to see on Monday whether there are any final changes to this ordinance.
Okay, so that'll be helpful, too, is that it may change and maybe those things will be addressed. But I want to talk about some of the city's history on this subject, because when you were elected in 2011, what was the city doing about affordable housing?
I love to play this game. Put a number in the air. What do you think the city was spending on affordable housing in 2011? Just give me a guess.
I mean, I know from research how much it was, but it did still surprise me that it was $0, if I'm not correct?
Zero local dollars. We like to
in
spend
2011.
In 2011, what we like to do in Denver is called OPM. We like to spend other people's money. And so when I got elected, there was one policy on the books, and it required affordability to be built when for-sale housing was built. We couldn't even require it in apartments because it was illegal. So we had one policy to build affordable for-sale homes. As developers built them, we got a payout from them. And we had zero local dollars, and we spent a little bit of federal money. That's what we did.
It's just crazy to me because by 2009 or 10, this is starting to be a problem. And not that long before, less than a decade before, I'm in my early 20s. Me and all my friends, I'm living in Capitol Hill. My girlfriends are living downtown in subsidized apartments because there's literally no one living downtown. And that shift, I know that it felt like it happened quickly, but then by 2011, we had to have known. I'm just thinking about all the work that was going into Lodo and like the stuff that Hickenlooper was implementing and all this revitalization. We know what happens when cities do that. People do want to go there and it makes things more expensive. But why do you think that was the way that it was when you walked into this situation?
Denver has this history of remembering the boom and bust economies. And we had a little complex at that time that we weren't quite good enough. And that if we asked for more, gosh, people might go somewhere else. You know, like we should be lucky if someone develops here. We should be lucky if someone does business here because, gee, we're competing against all these other folks. And it took a minute, I think, for our city to realize that these issues weren't just hitting the poorest of the poor. They were. We had homelessness. You remember there was a 10-year plan to end homelessness?
Yes.
We needed affordable housing in 2011. But what wasn't happening yet in 2011 is middle-class and upper-class families weren't having trouble bringing their kids home from college and having them start their lives in Denver. That wasn't happening yet. And until it started to impact a broader swath of our community, it was hard to build the political will to make big change.
It almost feels like we've been trying to catch up ever since.
We have been. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, Bree, because I get asked all the time, like, the things you've done, we can talk about the money that is going to housing today, but you know, it's not working. And I always say, what are you measuring? Are you measuring the lives that are impacted? And are you measuring the homes that have been built? Because if you do, our investments are working. The challenge is they're not to scale because the challenge has grown faster than our solutions. And we started so late. That's why it doesn't feel like it's made a difference yet.
This episode is brought to you by Choir League. Launched in Denver in September 2018, this social singing club is geared towards young professionals and meets once a week in a local bar, restaurant, or business for rehearsal and a happy hour. Choir League welcomes singers of all ability levels, so whether you only sing in your car or you have a music degree, you'll be right at home. The group performs every 8 weeks with flexible scheduling and a no-pressure environment. Sign up only for the concert cycles that fit your life. You don't even have to audition for Choir League. Truly, anyone is welcome to join. Think of it like your local kickball team, but for singing. They create a supportive environment with resources to help you stay on top of your singing game while having fun and making new friends. Choir League is also taking a trip to South Africa next year and would love for you to come along. For a list of performance dates and to register for the fall cycle starting at the end of August, visit choirleague.com. That's choirleague.com. This episode is brought to you by the Arvada Center. The Broadway smash Waitress the Musical comes to Colorado this fall. Featuring the music of Sarah Bareilles, this acclaimed work tells the story of a small-town diner waitress who leaves her rocky marriage to change her fate and future with her pie-making skills. And who doesn't like pie? The production features an all-local cast and all-woman creative team behind this sweet, sassy, and empowering feminist musical about a woman finding her way. The heartwarming story comes to life on stage as a celebration of friendship, chosen family, and the joys of a good pie. Waitress the Musical runs from August 30th through October 13th at the Arvada Center. For tickets and more information, visit arvadacenter.org. That's arvadacenter.org. This episode is brought to you by Denverse Magazine. Want to know more about the Mile High City's arts and culture scene from the actual artists themselves? Check out Denverse, a new magazine featuring poetry, fiction, and essays from Denver greats like Sam Tallent, Susie Q. Smith, Tom Murphy, and more. Denverse is an entirely independent, all-grassroots operation with no corporate backers. It's community-driven and locally focused. This magazine is also proud to be AI-free, meaning all the writing and art you see, read, and enjoy across its pages is made by real, local, human artists. The next issue comes out this fall, and you can subscribe right now and get a physical copy sent right to your mailbox. I don't know about you, but one of my favorite activities of all time is to sit back and enjoy a cup of coffee with a gorgeous, well-written magazine in my hand. Read the latest issue and subscribe right now by visiting denverse.com. That's DENVERSE.com. So one other thing I want to touch on before we move on from this time in 2011 was we also kind of have to talk about the camping ban. This is that moment too. What was going on?
We had a pushback on homelessness that was experienced on the street, and there wasn't the political will to take a punitive approach, but Occupy Denver happened.
Right. After Occupy Wall Street, it sort of spread across the country. There were these sort of groups rising up.
And it created an opportunity for those who had long wanted to criminalize encampments and being on the streets to propose an ordinance, and it passed. But it created a really important moment in Denver's history, which was, okay, if you're going to make it illegal to have shelter on the streets, then what are you doing to create shelter and to build it at scale for people who need it in this city? And is it okay that we're not spending any local dollars in housing?
Yeah, I just think that's helpful context for folks to know is not only were we not spending any money on affordable housing, we were also still having an issue with people going unhoused. The problem was evident. How did the city's approach to affordable housing evolve and change under Hancock? Because you worked alongside him, I think, his entire tenure.
Yep, we had the same terms. We started with one-time money. We started with $3 million in the budget, and we grew it each year while we gradually began to have agreement from the mayor's office that, hey, we actually do need to have money that's just set aside for housing, that isn't competing with other things, that isn't vulnerable to a downturn like a pandemic if it comes, that's always there for housing. And we passed that housing fund in 2015, and the first dollars started to flow in 2016. And for the first time, we're responsible for building housing and the people of Denver through their property taxes. And we put the first ever fee on development in this city. Big change for the politics of Denver.
Put some of that burden on the developers themselves.
Yes.
Which I think has long been a criticism is they don't take enough responsibility. Do you think that goes back to that fear of like, if we do that, they're going to leave?
Sure does. Maybe a little also political ideology. In 2018, when that fund was doubled, we added marijuana tax to the pot and we doubled the affordable housing fund. It passed unanimously. That tells you in just 2 years how extremely the challenge got worse in those years. You remember we were
100%.
Best city in America.
Yeah.
All of it was changing really fast. The electorate was changing. We had a national election that really brought an awakening of political activism in the city that affected us at the city. So from I can't charge a developer and it's not enough and it's not good enough to unanimously doubling it.
That's a good point. Let's come back to what we're dealing with now, which is we talked about the fees on new construction and things that Hancock and council did when you were on council. But Mayor Johnston is instead opting for a regressive sales tax, so taxing everyone equally. Why do you think he went that route?
Cities have very few tools to raise money for the services we need in Colorado. Sometimes people say to me, can't we, have a wealth tax, Robin? Can't we charge? And we can't. The state constitution doesn't give local government the ability to tax incomes or to tax wealth in that way. So we have two main things we can do. We can tax properties. We can tax products. We can also do fees. For example, that fee on development I told you about. So those are the tools. Now, we have a moment in time where the property tax has been elevated by, frankly, a group of right-wing individuals who can't win elections for office, and they have taken to the ballot and drummed up a beat that property taxes are the key issue in housing affordability. They're not. You can ask me why I know that. But they've drummed that up. And so we now have ballot measures that are potentially going to eviscerate the property tax in the state of Colorado. Most cities go to the property tax for housing. They do them through bonds, and they last 7-10 years, and they then do another one when it runs out. And that's just not a moment we can take on right here in Colorado. So the sales tax is what's left. But I do think it's really important to know, because I too, full disclosure, passed a sales tax to resolve homelessness. And that tax does exempt food. It exempts gas. It exempts feminine hygiene products, medicine. A lot of the things that low-income people need and spend the most on are not taxed under our sales tax in Denver. That's not the case in every city. Some cities do tax food. So I think it's just a little less regressive than you might think, and then national data might show, because of what we don't include in it here.
So you've worked in affordable housing for more than 10 years. You've watched the city change and develop according to policies that you helped shape. Is there a lesson that you've learned that you think would help Denverites understand their place in this sort of broader debate over affordability?
I think there's two things I'd like to say. The first is that you can grow impact over time. I shared with you where we started, $3 million in one-time funds. This year, we have nearly $100 million in a single year in two funding streams, an affordable housing fund and a fund to resolve homelessness. I want change overnight. I want a magic wand to solve housing. But the real work of governing often looks more like what I described to you. We have renter protections. We added an eviction defense fund. There's a whole bunch of things we didn't have time to talk about, but we put all those bricks together to build this pillar that we're now having this conversation on top of. So that's number one, is that we don't expect there to be no potholes in our city streets every single year. We fill the potholes as we go, and we make progress. And I think that lesson of how we continue to fill them every year, we don't give up. We don't say stop filling the potholes because there's just going to be a new one next winter. Every year we fill them, and we do the best we can. So that's the first thing. The second is we have to probably talk more pointedly about what we're wanting government to do, because I think what most people wish is that government could lower the cost of housing across the city. That's what we really want, right, Bree?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think that's what people's argument for rent control is, for instance, right? Which would be the closest thing I could think of that would do that, because we have seen over and over again, or at least it feels like, that new stuff gets built and it's still not affordable.
And rent control doesn't even do that, because it doesn't set the first rent. It only sets what the rent changes over time. We live in a country that sells land to the highest bidder. And then we've asked our local governments, our smallest level of government with the least taxing power, to solve for selling land to the highest bidder. It's a pretty impossible ask. There's not a tool that any government has to lower the cost of housing across a market. But there are things we can do. We do have to keep up with the supply of housing. That's what I've been doing a lot of research and writing about, is what is this supply stuff the governor's been doing, and how does it really work, and what are the limits?
Yeah.
We have to do that, and that has an impact, not as big as the governor might think, but also not zero. And then we got to make a difference for as many households as we can by being in that marketplace. We got to take a piece of land out of the market with the community land trust. We got to do caps on rents. We got to give a family their down payment assistance to help them make that leap to the first home. And every time we do that, that family is stably housed. And guess what? None of us can see them. We can't measure them anymore because they're invisible. So our success is hard for people to see.
That makes sense. Yeah. No, it is. It's hard to count. It really is.
Yeah.
Because we're seeing visually the experience still of unhoused folks. And
we see the failures. We see the gaps. My famous example is a city council candidate who stood in front of a beautiful building on East Colfax and decried the gentrification in his district and said, I will stop this. Bree, he was standing in front of brand new affordable housing for people with brain injuries. He had no idea.
Yeah.
It looked like all the other development. You couldn't see the vulnerable people whose lives were transformed inside of it.
Robin Kniech, thank you so much.
Oh, this was fun. Thanks.
As former Councilwoman Kniech mentioned, City Council is debating the mayor's proposal again tonight, August 12th. But the final vote won't be until later this month. So there's still time to make your voice heard. Would you vote for higher taxes to fund affordable housing? Or do you think the mayor needs to go back to the drawing board? Text or leave us a voicemail at the Affordable Denver hotline. That number is 720-500-5418. Again, give us your name, neighborhood, and your hot take at 720-500-5418. That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed this show, why not take a minute to tell your city council member about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our morning newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See ya!